Hi, everybody. We don't see many faces except for the people involved in this night. Yes, exactly. If you feel comfortable, if you have a good enough internet connection, hit that camera on button. It's nicer to see faces than to see black squares or rectangles. They're not square. We are Malina and Merten, Malina Lauterbach and Merten Lagatz, and we had the great pleasure this semester to host a project class in conjunction with the Berlin Biennial, with the mediation team of the Berlin Biennial, Duygu and Samira. Samira is here tonight. Hi, Samira. It was a great pleasure to work with you, and it was a maybe even greater pleasure to work with 10 students from Technische Universität Berlin, who will introduce themselves in a minute. So it is our pleasure. Oh no, all of you guys, thank you for making the time to come tonight. I hope you enjoy yourselves, and we'll hear and talk to you later. And now it's off to our hosts for the evening, which are Laura and Lena.
Thank you, Merten. We are also very excited to welcome all of you to this online panel, BB12xTUB Encounter tonight. This is Laura Desch, and I am Lena Affentranger. We have the honor to be talking to our guests Lotte Arndt, Gabrielle Hans, and Kader Attia on this year's 12th Berlin Biennial for Contemporary Art, the notion of repair and the city's colonial legacies.
Now I want to give you a brief idea of what we're going to do this evening. But firstly, I wanted to mention that this event is being recorded, and it's the sound and the video are being recorded, and it's going to be published on YouTube afterwards. So please also during the panel discussion during that part of the event, please keep your microphone off. And after introducing our guests, we will give a brief introduction explaining what is the BB12xTUB Encounter, so you also know where we're coming from and what's our impetus for tonight's event. And then we will get started with the questions for our distinguished guests. And following the panel discussion, we want to open the floor to the audience so they can also ask some questions. And this part will not be recorded or published anywhere.
First of all, I would like to introduce a guest who is connected to the Technical University of Berlin, Lotte Arndt. She is a researcher and curator who lives in Paris and accompanies the work of artists who question the post-colonial present. Lotte Arndt is part of the international project Reconnecting Objects, Epistemic Plurality and Transformative Practices in and Beyond Museums, that is located at the Technical University in Berlin, as well as the universities of the Western Cape, Dakar, Chang, and Oxford. She is conducting the research project on biocides and the antinomies of conservation in ethnographic museums. From 2014 until last year, she taught at the École Supérieure d'Art et Design in Valence. In addition, she is part of the artistic research group On Trade Off, co-founder of the online journal Troubles dans les Collections, and member of the editorial committee of Art Center L'Acrier in Rennes. In addition, she curated many exhibitions in France, Germany, and also Austria, and co-organizes cultural programs, screenings, and discussion in artistic and academic spaces. This is just to name a few of her many activities. We know that Lotte Arndt has been in contact with the Berlin Biennial in many ways, very certainly within the panel discussion series from the 8th Berlin Biennial for contemporary art, Crawling Doubles, Colonial Collection and Effect on Entomophilia. This is maybe also where she met our second guest of the night, and thank you very much for being here tonight, Lotte.
Well, talking of the Biennial, let me make a smooth transition to our second guest, Gabrielle Hans. She knows the Berlin Biennial like no one else, and in general, there's probably few people with such expertise and experience in the Berlin art scene. Gabrielle Hans studied art history, and sociology at the Freie Universität in Berlin, And she's been working for the Berlin Biennial since 2002 and been its director since 2003. So under her guidance, the Biennial has developed most of its trajectory, one could say. And she was acting as the director of Kunstwerke Institute for Contemporary Art between 2004 and 2016. Besides her close involvement with the Biennial, Gabrielle Hans was the assistant director of the Staatliche Kunsthalle Berlin from 1985 to 1993, and then head of the Department for Visual Art at the Senate Department for Science, Research and Culture in Berlin. Also, she has realized and curated a wide array of exhibitions. So we feel very grateful to have you here tonight, because there's surely no one more qualified to talk to us about Berlin and the Biennial. So thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy schedule.
And last but certainly not least, with great pleasure, I get to introduce Kader Attia. He's the curator of this year's 12th Berlin Biennial for Contemporary Art and has been a renowned artist for many years, living and working in Paris and Berlin. He grew up in France and Algeria and studied philosophy and art in Paris and in Barcelona, and has lived in Congo, Venezuela, Mexico, and Spain afterwards. In his multimedia, artistic, as well as curatorial and research and practice, Kader has been working with the concept of repair for over 20 years. This is something we will certainly get back to in the discussion that is following this. Kader himself has exhibited in many biennials, such as the 12th Shanghai Biennial, the Manifesta 12 in Palermo, the 57th Venice Biennial, or the Documenta 12 in Kassel. Additionally, he showed his works in numerous exhibitions in the Kunsthaus in Zurich, in the SCSC Pompeia in Sao Paulo, in the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and the Tate Modern in London. Or also in the Medi Center in Rotterdam, where he had a panel talk together with Lotte Arndt in 2013. So I think you are already familiar faces to each other. In 2016, Kader Attia built the space La Colonie in Paris for exchange of ideas and an open discussion with the focus on decolonialization. Since the pandemic, La Colonie has been closed, but it is hopefully soon to be opened up again. Thank you very much, Kader, for being here tonight with us.
Well, this event tonight is the culmination of our months-long treatment of the topics of Berlin, the Biennial and its connection to the locus Berlin, as well as the concept of repair from Kader Attia. And in the course of the seminar at the Technical University, we wanted to get familiar with the work of our guests tonight and to be able to learn from this, from their work and their concepts, and translate this into our own ideas and lived realities. And the result is this event we're having right now, as well as a zine, which we've collectively created. And I think it turned out really amazing and with very interesting contributions. I'm very proud that we all did this. And at this point, I want to say, first of all, a big thanks to the mediation team of the Berlin Biennial, who also supported us throughout this whole seminar, Samira and Duygu, and also a big thank you to our teachers, Merten and Malina, who enabled this whole thing and guided us through it. And now I want to pass the mic to my colleagues to introduce their contributions. So maybe Hoa, if you want to start.
Hi, I'm Hoa, born and raised not so far from Berlin. In our zine, I wrote about my personal perception of how I experience racism and fetishization and my inner struggles as an approach to Kader Attia's concept of repair.
Hi, I'm Monique, and in my contribution for the zine, I talk about my experience growing up in the so-called African quarter in Bedding and how, as a child, I was unaware of the brutal history behind the street names and the places I used to play at. And going from there, I take a closer look at the phenomenon of human zoos and which are casts that were taken from humans living under colonial rule and are to this day shown in museums around the world.
Hi, I'm Eileen, and in my zine contribution, I'm exploring a memory from a time when the pandemic seemed to suppress any activism in Berlin and left discourse was barely present. It's a memory about protest songs and their powerful effect during demonstrations, during a specific demonstration in solidarity with the farmers' protests in India at the beginning of last year at Rathaus Neukölln. And for this, I created a 3-dimensional model of the place and implemented visual material of the demo, as well as protest song texts and the text I've written myself to create a kind of multi-layered insight into this memory.
Hello, my name is Johannes. In recent years, I've been working mainly on the relationships between art, society, and religion, with a particular focus on representation. My manifesto-like text, Kunstraum Sprache, Art Space Language, deals specifically with the initial question of what value art can have for social discourses, and contains demands like ease of access and a broader distribution on artists and institutions in relation to spaces and language. Hi, my name is Matthis, and I created a part in the zine together with Klara, Laura, and Laura. Our part in the zine tries to connect the concept of repair with locations in Berlin that are related to the Berlin Biennale, such as the Ex-Rota print that was the main exhibition place at the last Biennale.
In addition to that, we also went out and found some other places that represent the concept of repair in a clear way, like the Breitscheidplatz, where a memorial for the victims of the terror attack in 2016 is inspired by the Japanese kintsugi technique, which also sparked the idea for the design of our zine cover, which you can see here, and which was created by Laura.
Yeah, the idea came to me when we discussed Kader Attia's concept of repair in the beginning of the semester. And the technique of kintsugi means that broken ceramic items are restored with gold. So the objects are not only reconstructed, but transformed or even enriched. I also worked on the typography with Vangelis and Paula.
Hello, everyone. I'm Vangelis, and I specifically worked on the creation of the map of Berlin, which is a more abstract design of the U and S lines that are spreading around the city. And each number is connected to a location from these that Matthis and Klara explained. This is the map.
Yeah, hi, I'm Paula, and I also had a lot of fun to work on this together, and especially to get creative ourselves. And for the zine, I worked on a photo series together with Tara Fessler. She's a photographer and graphic designer from Berlin, based in Leipzig. And our attempt was to capture the concept of repair in our own neighborhood, Berlin-Neukölln. Yeah, but I think the photos speak for themselves. Yeah, Lena.
Thank you. In my part of the scene, I talked to Klara Wessendorf, who's actually also present, I see, and Fee Wüstenberg, 2 authors and editors of the Berlin initiative Straßenlärm. The initiative focuses on colonial, patriarchal, and Nazi manifestations in the city space of Berlin, and they made a map to remember and as well educate about the ongoing anti-discriminatory initiatives that are in Berlin.
I just wanted to add that the zine will be posted in the chat here momentarily, so you can all look at it.
Yeah. This is the end of the introduction part, and it brings us to the first question of the night. Over the past months, as you've seen, we got to know the concept of repair, or the notion of it. And Kader, you are probably asked this question very often, but can you briefly explain for those people who are not familiar with the concept yet, in what way does repair play a role in your work? And in the sense of mixing up the question a little bit, how would you explain this to a child?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I would say that particularly when it comes to very complex concepts, child are have more access to complexity than adult, because they have a thinking that works with ellipse, and they can dare to think things through a sort of magical process. I got many examples by scientists who have been working with child. A friend in London, her name is Nikki Clayton. She's an ornithologist, and she told me many years she was doing tests with kids, comparing the intelligence of kids and ravens and crows, because they are also very clever animals. And she told me that there was a test in which the animal was very good to find a solution of a problem. And she said, you see this test, for instance, kids can do it very good, but not adults. And I mean, I have to say also, this is very personal, but when I started to think the repair, I really started as a kid, basically. I was focusing on the physicality of repairs. I was living in Congo in the 90s, and I bound what in my memory I saw in Algeria with my cousin Rabah repairing object. By the way, this moment appears in one of my films. I never paid attention to it, and many years because it's a film of 1997, and 10 years after, I remember that, oh wow, this beginning of the film where my cousin Rabah is juxtaposing or assembling two leftover objects to make really absolutely not stage a toy for his little brother. He was just repairing something. So when I was then living in Congo and I was observing the way that people, particularly kids again, were repairing, I mean, giving a new life to dead object of their environment. Of course, they echoed for me. That it was a sort of echo with what I observed when I was a teenager and when I was even a bit older in Algeria. But I think that this artistic practice of observing, without, of course, falling into the romanticism of Dali or Picasso, who would say, "Oh, kids are good drawer," which I think they are good, but it's just like I think that you all know that kids do not filter, and then when they speak, and I think when they observe, it's the same. So I started to be very sensitive that by the fact that most of the time repairs of objects that have been repaired in a very local context were always leaving the trace of the injury of the object. So the purpose was just to fix it, but was not to hide the injury. And for me, this can be explained to kids, definitely, because they are not obsessed by these needs to hide the injury. It comes very late.
Thank you very much. What is the title of the film you just mentioned?
It's called Correspondance. And Correspondance, it's a film I did in 1997 between my family living in Paris, I mean, in Garges-les-Gonesse, in the north in the suburb of Paris, and my family living in Algeria, because I used to go there during a very dark time, the 90s, where in Algeria, civil war. And my whole family, I mean, brother and sister didn't want to go. And then I did a kind of correspondence, by sending images and going back and forth by maintaining a sort of correspondence, the English term. And really, I mean, this film, actually, I like it just because of this beginning, because it was not staged. I was like having my camera, my DV camera constantly with me. And it took me 10 years to reread this scene that lasts like 3 minutes, 2 minutes at the beginning of Correspondance, which I'm still working on, I think.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the interesting answer, and also very interesting to see how this childlikeness is also very much kind of connected to this notion of repair. I hope we get to talk about it more later in the discussion. I'm sure we will. But our next question is more about the Berlin Biennial. So, we were discussing a lot of questions of accessibility and mediation in regards to the Berlin Biennial, especially. because we were asking ourselves who it addresses and what's the target audience and those kind of questions. So, and we observe more and more that museums and contemporary art institutions and art workers, freelance art workers, are trying to widen the public they address. And so maybe, Gabi, you have something to say about this. Our question would be, how do you foster discourse that speaks to the whole of society instead of focusing on the well-educated strata that engages with art anyways, maybe in your work with the Berlin Biennial? I think your microphone is still off.
You need to unmute yourself.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you very much for this question, but maybe I have to start from another angle. I mean, as the Berlin Biennial, we are financed by the Cultural Foundation of the Federal State, as you might all know. Of course, we have and we share a mandate not only to promote arts and culture and contemporary art, but also historical research and democratic education. And there it comes a little bit to your question. And of course, to make this accessible to the general public, first of all. So we need to rely on a public sphere that at least allows us for controversially and also discursive, but sometimes also, of course, disputational debates, which we always would like really to get on towards the public. And of course, as a cultural institution, or especially as an institution for contemporary art, we at least cannot balance what was missing in the whole educational system of the schools and all what is like related to that, especially after the PISA report came out and the whole educational system in the schools was more and more focused on the natural science and technical science things, and they misses the whole musical and cultural education. So we cannot balance this. I'm really open, or I'm really honest to say this, even if there is, of course, more money given, especially to the cultural institutions. Yes, to do the cultural, educational, and mediational work. So you are totally right. The outreach and mediation became more and more important for us over the last few years, and we are really happy that we now have also, since I guess 2-3 years, a colleague who is really engaged with it. So it was Duygu, and now it's Samira, who stepped in for Duygu, because Duygu is on maternity leave now. And maybe Duygu, maybe Samira can also let you know a little bit more about what we did, because Samira is not only, at least at the moment, the one who is taking care for the whole mediation program for the future of the biennial, means for the upcoming 12th Berlin Biennial, but she was also part of the mediators team for the last Berlin Biennial. So one place which was already mentioned, I guess also in, I don't know, in someone's, maybe in the biography or before, was, for example, Ex Roter Brind, which we opened up as a space in Wedding for the last Berlin Biennial, to maybe have the possibility to inform beforehand, before we are coming out with the whole artist list and with all the works and the exhibition, to get more intimacy, to explain also a little bit the concept behind and find ways to address certain communities. And yeah, in a way that it is like not only a hierarchical system where we are coming and say, that's it, you have to trust us, you have to know this, we will lecture you now, but to find ways for an exchange. And I guess this is very, very important for when it comes to outreach and mediation. And maybe Samira, you can talk a little bit about your experiences also from the last Berlin Biennial, and what are the plans and what did we also learn from the last year's Biennial to go ahead now with the upcoming, or the last, not last year's, but the 11th Berlin Biennial, and what are we learning and how are we going ahead with the 12th Berlin Biennial?
Yeah, so yeah, maybe for the ones that don't know, so I'm, as Gabi said, I'm filling in for Duygu Örs, who's a great colleague and also inspiration in like art mediation for me. And I think the question was also like how can like a biennial reach to all society? And I don't think this is possible in general. As Gabi already said, like, let's be real, this is like biennials and lots of art spaces are very like wide institutions. They create lots of barriers. So not everybody, like literally body-wise, is invited. So I think one thing we have to learn, also thinking of repair, is dealing with the wounds that are present in institutional spaces that are created by them, also by art mediation, because we're all kind of complicit in this. So I think this is really important, acknowledging like the space itself, like the social space, what bodies are present and who's not invited. Because I think in contemporary art spaces, there's this narrative of including or trying to include everyone, which is sometimes just like a surface of neoliberalism. And in the end, like in reality, obviously, this is not a space for everybody. So what we try to do, maybe also thinking of repair, is I think before seeing art mediation as a way of repair, maybe a space for it, we have to acknowledge those wounds and really also look at the structure, who's working at the space, who's not there, things like this. And in the last biennial, I mean, there was a huge focus on solidarity, and with the COVID pandemic, it got really crazy. And I mean, it was all fresh to us, like new, but I think we learned that it's really important that not just one biennial can fix all of this, like also thinking of repair. Again, this is something that is, I think, has to be, as Gabi said as well, a place for like conflicts, you know, like also unlearning, and not just as buzzwords, but really thinking of how is this institution structured, and who's not part of the conversation. And if we want to have conversations with these people, like now, for example, thinking of like the city's landscape, like in Berlin, there's so many groups like decolonial activists and groups that are already doing great work. So I think in order to try to get in touch with them, we really have to think of their needs as well, and not just try to educate them like in a missionary mindset of trying to teach them how to fit into an art space, but it's more the other way around. Like we have to, look at the wounds we're creating every day. And this is something we're trying to do with the mediation, but I think it's important to know it's a long process. Like it's not something that will just happen with one biennial, and we all have to work on it. But I think it's an experiment. It's important to, especially in mediation, there's so many things that you cannot foresee. You just have to go with the flow sometimes. And that's also the beauty of it. But this also means like being ready for conflict and also dealing with it, like learning how to, embrace it a little more. Yeah.
Maybe I can add one last little point, because as you all know, biennial is every 2 years. So the question is how to build up the trust, how to really stay then also after the biennial as the event, as the exhibition, after 3 months of program, how to deal with what is happening afterwards, which is really for a biennial a very difficult question. So we are in the good situation that since we have this born cooperation situation with KW, I have to say that we can really try to hand it over and to work also after the biennial with those groups or however you would like to say it, communities which we had been in contact and in exchange during the running period of a biennial. But this is very special for the Berlin Biennial that we are able to do this. It's not, it's for some other biennials all over the world quite more difficult.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's very interesting. I found it very interesting how you, Samira, just kind of almost categorically negated that these spaces are for everyone, and also what the factors in this, like for example, how you just mentioned the PISA report in this, Gabriele. And so what I'm asking myself now, and maybe Lotte, you have something to say about this, because I think you also have a very broad experience in cultural institutions and such. For whom do we do our work? Like who does our work address, or who should it address?
Yes, thank you so much for your question. Thank you so much for being in conversation with all of you. I think my position is a little bit a different one because I do not live in Berlin any longer for more than 12 years. So I look at what happens in the city from quite a distance. And maybe some of the questions that you're trying to figure out in a really site-specific manner, and I find this really rich how you do this in a site-specific manner, are not exactly the same in different contexts as it is the case in Paris. I especially liked a lot how in your zine you develop the way how you think about the city from the different narratives also of your biographical involvement and of the way to deconstruct or to appropriate broader concepts from how you personally experience them. And I think this is a super important approach, and it was really rich to see your journal. I always have a little bit of a problem when one asks me for whom do we do our work. Is in a certain manner I feel that one of the moments where a public space in an emphatic sense would work is when you cannot answer this question. So when there's actually a space that functions in a manner that keeps an openness that precisely means that you cannot predict for whom this will be a productive space. Why most of the time when we're working, what happens is the opposite. So in a certain manner, we know who are the people who will come. There are these target groups that art spaces are a lot of times formulating, isn't it? And then saying, yes, they came and this is what we wanted to have. And now it's fine and we can go home. Well, actually, we know that the moment when things get productive, and it is often moments of conflict, and it's often moments where the structures that are celebratory, that are exclusive, are getting into conflict with what surrounds them. And I wanted to quote one festival with an artist with whom I just did an interview. She's called Latifa Labishi, and she organizes in the outskirts of Rennes in the French countryside for more than 10 years now a festival called Extension Sauvage, where she actually invites artists with whom she works around the globe to come to this village where she lives for 20 years now in Combourg. And she actually speaks about the way how the institution there always approached her to say that you have to explain to the local population what will happen there. And so this is precisely this conception of culture is something that comes and has to be taught to the rural people who are there. While Latifa says the other way around, most of the artists who arrive there learn tons from the fact to be in contact with this environment, with these people, with these knowledges, with these practices that they don't know from their lives, many times reduced to international venues where you're actually not in contact with these practices. And I think this approach that shifts the notion of what culture is and the way that that is conceived, that is not unilaterally and not top down, but like a negotiation that goes in several senses is extremely important for all our work.
Yeah, thank you, Lotte. This, I mean, is kind of connected to what Samira said before, that the Biennale is trying to also make a lucrative space for the already existing alternatives in Berlin, and to welcome them in the Biennale. And also, you talked about openness and trying to extend a certain circle. And I mean, you said it, we were very focused on Berlin in our preparation. And if you looked at the Berlin Biennial and the locations, it got obvious to us that it is pretty much centered around Mitte and Auguststraße. Yes, there's a place in Wedding, but it barely ever leaves the ring. And Kader, we wanted to ask you in this part, current art discourses often relate to global injustices, but how does your work address Berlin's social and urban problems also in your curatorial work?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to add something regarding the previous question, because I think it's, I mean, this question, of course, this question sounds like crucial when you are addressing a public project. And at the same time, the more I'm not young anymore, and the more I'm getting old, the more I think that it's also a kind of a reinvention of the wheel. Each time we wonder whether we are reaching the correct audience or not. I think we should sometimes to reverse the process and think also why the people we don't know are not here. And then we came into a kind of self-critique process that will answer your second question. How do you contextualize yourself in the city where you are speaking? And for me, I've always been caring a lot about the audience, not even a lot. For me, it makes sense. It's the keystone of a project. You really have to think that mediation by its from the mediology definition is really this in-between space that exists between which is a message basically. And I think what is important is to you know, if I would say something that I have learned the last more than 10 years, I've been thinking the question of restitution of artifact, is that this ongoing conversation that is the debate on restitution is all about access, basically. Actually, restitution is access. And the problem of most of the Biennale, but also most of the time of contemporary art, is that it denies this crucial care for access of what we are, of the conversation we are developing. And I think this involved many different people, not only the society at large. Of course, it's not by working specifically to attract them that you will individualize the society. It's just by producing trans-individuation processes, which means conversations. And as far as I'm concerned, I really think that a city like Berlin, like many other, but particularly Berlin, where I live, is a city of ghosts, but ghosts that are very active. And you can feel this, you can feel it from the urban plan, from the architecture, but also from all these sort of communities that are living together, but never exchanging each other, basically. And for instance, for me, it was very interesting. I've been spending more than 10 years in a neighborhood where there are many Vietnamese who have grown up in the GDR, for instance, but I've never seen them in the previous Berlin Biennale, for instance. So for me, it was important to think about, what these people who have come, who have came here and have grown up. I mean, have founded a family, and their children have grown up here as German. Like I've grown up in France as half French. What these people think about, what do they have to tell us that we don't know, basically, to help this co-individuation I was speaking about. And that's why I think we cannot cover everything, but what is important is that we definitely need sometimes to really like reverse the process of, instead of trying to to provide something, just leave the need for a presence or a visibility of invisible communities, invisible histories, invisible. But you know, I'm not including only racialized people. I think also living in the east part of Berlin, I'm still very much interested by the way that people who have grown up in the GDR who are white have also been, thinks that they have been invisibilized since the unification. And for me, the city, the ghosts I'm speaking about are, for instance, these are the ghosts of the city. They're here. You look at them, you see clearly that you really see a difference. When I'm always on my bike, I can tell you clearly that there's a difference between, I don't know, Charlottenburg and Greifswalder Straße, where I do live. And it's here. It's almost like the GDR is in front of you. And there is this ghostly presence, the ghost of a history, that I think it's important to when we speak about the repair, it's actually important to understand that there is a need for repair because there are injuries that are still open. So, and I cannot give you the whole list, but as far as I'm concerned, these are the areas I'm very interested in because I lived in, basically.
And like, do you have an example of how you would try to include that specifically in the concept?
I cannot give you a name specifically, but what I really want is to create a space for artists, but also for voices, for people who are not using art practices to say something. Because I came into it not with art, basically. If you want a very personal question, I'm a very close friend through my wife with a couple of psychoanalysts who have grown up in the GDR. And I've been, because it's a field of research that I'm working on for years. And this, and this has, Johannes has given me a lot through many conversations, an insight on this very much opaque part of the Berliner society that helped me to then look at, wonder about art practices differently. So it's not I was like looking artists from the GDR, but on the contrary, I was very surprised by his story. Also is very interesting when he tells you that he wanted to forever to become a psychoanalyst. And in the former GDR, in the whole GDR, there were two psychoanalysts, and they were like the official psychoanalysts. So basically, they were not psychoanalysts. And I think what I found interesting in this ghost example I just gave you is that I think it's late enough to say that sometimes I think that dead people speaks to us through the unconsciousness, basically. So I'm very much into also these layers, of the dead, and how they are activating of course the now.
Berlin is this place of many different parts, and also, as you said it now, ghost, active or past. And in the meantime, there are also a lot of like very momentary scandals and debates happening, who then create a well-deserved public backlash. And here we're kind of changing the scene a little bit, but the example would for example be the Humboldt Forum. Lotte, you were part of an opposition against the construction of the Humboldt Forum in around 2010. And now the previously very vocal public discussion about the Humboldt Forum seems to have simmered down. What happens to the critically raised issues? Have they been solved? Or how do you deal with the stagnation of discourses like this one? Or what keeps the debate alive?
Thank you very much for this question. Before jumping on this, I would like to react on what Kader just said, because I had by pure chance just the opportunity to see again a film that you did a couple of years ago that is called The Phantom Limb, Le Membre Fantôme. I don't know how you say this in German, but it's partly shot in Berlin.
In German, auf Deutsch is Phantomschmerzen.
Phantomschmerzen. Aha, voilà.
It's pain. which is interesting.
And it was part of the screening of that I really highly recommend to you if ever it comes out in German cinemas, of a film that was premiered last year during the Biennale called Us by Alice Diop, which in my eyes is one of the major films of the past years, where she actually follows the train line of the RERB in the Parisian suburbs, which is a subject that Kader worked a lot about and with. And she brings together socially extremely different neighborhoods. So there are scenes that are actually shot with royalists that cry over the death of the last French king in the Basilique de Saint-Denis, right next to a Malian undocumented worker who is on the phone with his mother. And like the attempt of Alice in this film is to say how to think about the society from this kind of these contrasts, no, of these tensions, and to claim something that she calls us, while bringing together these realities that seem to be absolutely disconnected. So it's a major film. She had the program of 4 days right now at Centre Pompidou in Paris, and Kader's film was part of it. And I was really, what struck me in the film was the way how the Berlin cityscape and all the wounds that are part of the wall and of the East-West story are actually resonating with this very metaphorical and at the same time very physical way to understand how histories of absences, histories of loss, and histories of reconstruction come together. So maybe this is just something resonating also for the seminary that could be interesting to have a look at. I was really happy to see this film again in this context. For the Humboldt Forum, yes, as you said, I mean, I left Berlin more than 10 years ago, and since then the movements of opposition to the Humboldt Forum were ever growing, and this is, I think, something that is absolutely something really precious and something really strong to keep in mind, and that very often in the Parisian context, where the whole restitution debate is structured in a very top-down manner, state-driven, with a diplomacy that is like very vertical. The fact that in Berlin this was carried by so many very different actors and discussions that are still there in spite of the fact that the forum opened, I think is something that that already is part of this work that prevents that decolonization is just an empty term. And I was actually wondering, but this is maybe more a question that goes towards you, that in the moment where an institution like the Humboldt Forum opens, so where obviously there is big displacement of a cultural infrastructure in a city, which now will receive millions and millions of funding that will most probably no longer go to different, to other cultural spaces, how, as cultural activists in the city, do you adapt your strategies in order to answer? So in order to, at the moment when we already see that the boycott strategy will no longer be fruitful very long, because people will answer, people will be invited. So how, as artists and cultural activists in the city, there is a displacement of the strategy, and there is a way to resist in a different manner this appropriation that is maybe one of the major and very impressive gestures that the Humboldt Forum is dealing with right now. Like to do as if the main agent of a decolonial movement would be the Humboldt Forum itself, which is quite a thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very fascinating how this discussion also kind of simmered down now, and the agents kind of turn in this discussion. And I mean, it's also a very good question of you of how we can maybe change our strategies as cultural workers. But yeah, regarding this repair concept, we were also wondering if this traumatic experience, like the withdrawal of cultural heritage, which in the Humboldt Forum is now like manifested like this, if this can be repaired at all, and if so, how? And I don't know, maybe Kader, you also have something to say about this.
I'm sorry, regarding particularly the Humboldt Forum. Look.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you have so much insight about the Humboldt Forum specifically, but generally the withdrawal of cultural heritage, if this can be repaired, as we were, if your concept of repair, has like a connection to this as a way of mending these colonial traumata.
I mean, you know, the concept of repair is a polysemous concept. And when I was saying that I started to observe very physical form of repair, the research continued very deep into the ethical aspect of the repair, and then it became political. And when I really love Berlin because also of architecture, and I've been like biking for years. I mean, in the city, and one of the things that really struck me in the Humboldt Forum, of course, is everything that Lotte just developed. But on the other hand, is also the erasure of the Palace der Republik for this architecture in an axis that is really quite problematic, because if you look at the axis, is a bit like decentralized from the axis of Unter den Linden until the Brandenburg Tor. And then you have also in the line the monument of the Holocaust. So there is a very strong symbolic act that has been, I think, a political agenda, because it's not by chance that you put such cake, you know, of cream here, and not think just twice about, oh, we had an incredible modernist socialist architecture here, and also basically it did not work. It's like this. It's like the cake. The cake, you got it because it has the shape of a cake, and the cherry on the cake is the ethnographic collection. So there's something that there are three aspects for me that I'm still working on. I know that the repair also confront the idea that sometimes the repair is impossible. The repair is also the irreparable. But at the same time, it's kind of there is something that probably is typical of a city like Berlin also, that sometimes there is a kind of irrationality, you know, like this airport that took, I don't know, 10 years to open. Why, when you look at the whole urban landscape as a sort of psychoanalytical layers of history, as an unconsciousness, why we went so back into the neurosis to excavate what used to represent a hero of erasation of the region, of the Prussian region, to put it back. I mean, you know, Freud used to compare the unconsciousness continent with the landscape of a city, with Rome, for instance, the city of Rome. And I think sometimes I have to say that we should not separate the question of the restitution of the old art from Africa from the restitution of from the erasure of this socialist architecture, and what those people think it's a restitution of the past that they have been excavating and bringing back. So there's something here that needs to be elaborate, like a chess game, you know, with the three pathway at the same time. There's something that you cannot separate them.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for your interesting insight. It's also a topic that keeps on giving, the Humboldt Forum, I feel like. But I think we have to also kind of get to our last questions now, and there's still so much we want to talk about. And well, we were very inspired about what we heard about La Colonie, what we learned about it. It's such an open space for discussion for also very different political beliefs and such. And now maybe to you, Gabi, there's a very current debate going on. I mean, we saw that about the Kunsthalle Berlin. We saw that you and Kader also signed the open letter that was published just today. And I mean, you also worked at the Staatliche Kunsthalle Berlin before. So maybe in regards to this, but also in general about also the debate in the Humboldt Forum, we were interested in how you perceive the debating culture in Berlin in regards to these cultural institutions. Maybe you want to say something about that.
Yeah, it's a difficult question, I have to say, but thank you for that. I mean, looking at the Humboldt Forum, maybe let's start with that. I guess at the moment we can do that, what we are doing. We are doing a biennial with these topics, or not with these topics, but talking about what it would mean today to talk about the emergent topics of decolonization. We did it already a little bit like with the 8th Berlin Biennial, as we problematized exactly this whole move of the collections. Yeah, and I mean, the whole history of the Berlin Biennial is a little bit always also an answer to what is happening in the city. Even if it comes to the 7th Berlin Biennial with Artur Smiejewski, open up the space for Occupy and so on and so on. I mean, when you are looking at the history of the Berlin Biennial, and when you are looking that the surface and the foil is always also Berlin, there are really like, from also the time distance, you can really see that there are always like specific or special also reactions to what is happening in the city. For this now upcoming debate, I don't know, it's difficult, I have to say, how to keep the power of this boycott and the debate which started on this Friday as this Berliner Kunsthalle or this Kunsthalle Berlin was opened, how to keep it up. So there are several initiatives, I guess. There will be several events or discussions, panel discussions coming up also with the artists. I'm really, really happy, I have to say, that there had been also, in the meantime, a lot of artists who took out their works from the Diversity United exhibition, which really shows also the engagement of the artists, yeah, which is for us very, very important that the artists are with us and not looking at, okay, I can show my work there and it's attractive, and of course I will do it without reflecting in which circumstances they are and what is at least the whole complex of this endeavor with Mr. Smerling at that time. So I don't know what will happen. I don't know what's going on. I guess, of course, the surface was this whole Smerling private thing, but it needs to come down to a really political debate. What's going on in this case with the Tempelhof area? I mean, there had been so many ideas in the past and so many also good approaches for how to deal with this, but still there is no concept, and it's only like handing out for, I don't know, 2.4 million or 1.2 million. It's this amount of money is it's quite like, yeah, at least equal if it's 2.4 or 1.2 million, but it's a disaster, I have to say. It's really a disaster, and we try to keep it up. I mean, we as Berlin Biennial as well as SKW are in contact for hosting also like discussions and panels. You saw that I and also Kader and also Chris, as the director of KW, had been signing the open letter, which was came from Clemens and from Hito and from Jörg Heiser. And I was really very happy that the artists took over also the initiative and really formulated this great letter, which went deeper in the system and in the complexity of what is happening there. And yeah, I mean, we have really to be engaged with this. But on the other side, it's also that we are sometimes like so busy with our own things, and we are so much financed, we are so under supported, so that we are always like looking for how can we deal this and how can we deal this, and we need also really to be careful with not careful, but we need to take our priorities. And of course, for me, it's like I can be engaged now in this whole Kunsthalle topic, which is really a nightmare. But you cannot save everything. Yeah. So coming back to my work at the Staatliche Kunsthalle, I mean, that is what was already also mentioned in the press and in the essays, which from Niklas as well as from Peter Richter in the Süddeutsche. Of course, there was a Kunsthalle in Berlin, which was founded in 1977, was located at the Bikini House at Breitscheidplatz, and was up until 1993, and then the whole bankrupt situation of the city popped up, and then they closed this Kunsthalle and also another and an orchestra and the Schiller Theater. So this was this whole situation in 1993. But this Kunsthalle was a city-run, not private Kunsthalle. It was that what we know where a Kunsthalle is coming from. It's a kind of institution which was born out of a wish of the citizens to have a place for contemporary art. Yeah. So, and what is now happening at the Tempelhof, I mean, I do not have to tell you. I guess you are all hopefully a little bit aware. I guess Niklas Mark really did a great job in really research about this, and Peter Richter did it as well. And of course, we are all in. So I avoided to have a meeting with Mr. Smerling. I'm really, really open for that, or I'm really honest, because I said no. In that moment when I have a meeting, I will all of a sudden be someone with whom you had like very constructive debates, you know. And this is something where you have really also to find your own way to say, no, this is not possible for me. This is my statement, and this is what I'm going to protest for, to boycott, and for avoid any kind of irritations while meeting or trying to start a debate or with this person in a debate, of course, but not in this relationship. So. And yeah, we need to take it, and we need to bring it forward, and we need to address it to the real people and to the ones who are responsible for that. And this is what we try to do with the open letter.
Yeah. Yeah, well, thank you so much for your interesting insights. And also, I think it's so important also because, I mean, Lotte already mentioned the boycott against Humboldt Forum, and now with Kunsthalle, there's also this boycott, how maybe we can also learn from different initiatives. And yes, but I think sadly we're pretty much through with our questions time-wise.